So today marks the 10-year anniversary of Steve Jobs passing, and I'm on a walk in nature to commemorate Steve Jobs. This is something that he would always love to do. He was a nature guy. He loved taking walking meetings, and you can see that with the way Apple campus was designed. He wanted there to be trees and modeled it after Stanford's campus. But in today's video, I've been thinking all morning about Steve Jobs and how Apple wouldn't be Apple without Steve Jobs. I mean, let's face it. People used to say that as soon as Steve passed away, Apple was just going to go down. In some ways it has, in some ways it hasn't. Steve Cook, he's a great CEO. And I think that Apple needs Steve Cook right now. But they also needed Steve Jobs to give that brand a push and to create revolutionary products. And we can see right now today that Apple is stealing designs back from when Steve Jobs was CEO. So Steve Cook is a numbers guy. He's a logistics guy. He's the guy that's going to make sure that the supply chain is intact, make sure that the suppliers are going to have everything ready to go. Hold on, let me grab my phone. And he's the guy that's going to grow the numbers, grow the stock. But Steve Jobs was the visionary, and there's a few things that Steve Jobs did that is still embedded in Apple's culture right now. One of the things I think about firsthand is privacy. Steve Jobs was so keen on making sure everything is private. He was known for making sure that apps and services and things that you interact with on the iPhone ask you permission, and they ask you every time, and that you have to opt out if you don't want your information being shared. He wanted that to be a thing with Apple products, and obviously with the news and events that have happened with Apple, with the FBI and stuff, their stance on privacy is exactly the same. That hasn't changed. Another thing that I think about when I think about Steve Jobs and Apple is the quality of the products that they were putting out back when Steve was the CEO. Obviously, Apple products are beautiful. They're beautiful to look at. You go into an Apple store, everything is nice. That started with Steve Jobs. Some of you may not be old enough to remember when he died, but that was right around the time when the iPhone 4S and 4 were coming out, and those designs were peak Apple iPhone designs. I mean, we're still going back to those iPhone designs today with squared off iPhones. And when Steve Jobs was booted from Apple and he went to Next, started his own company Next, he actually finished the insides of the enclosures for his computers. Why would he do that? Well, Steve Jobs had this philosophy that the user is going to be able to sense the quality of a product even if he can't see it. So he would spend more money. It was a bad financial decision to do this, but they finished the inside of the products. And when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he brought that same philosophy, and they actually finished the insides of the aluminum of the stainless steel of the iPod, and they still finished the insides of their designs. Why? Because on some level, he feels like that extra bit of quality, the end user is going to be able to tell. So that is something that Steve Jobs brought to Apple. Another thing I've been thinking about this morning, thinking about Steve Jobs, is his ruthless refinement. And if I could describe Steve Jobs into one or two words, ruthless refinement is what I would say. He was ruthless when it came to refining the staff. If you didn't cut it, if you weren't up to snuff, you were gone. He was ruthless when it came down to his communication. If you could say something in 10 words versus 3, he would prefer you to use 3. Get to the point. Make sure everything is concise, to the point. Say what you need to say. Don't say any more. That was Steve Jobs' way. And some people thought he was a dick for that, but ruthless refinement was his style. He took Apple, when he came back, they had 10 different product lines. He refined those into 4 different product lines. And they doubled down on those 4 and made those 4 the best things that they could make. He was ruthless when it came down to design decisions. A lot of people harp on Apple for, removing certain ports, removing the headphone jack. That's nothing new. Steve Jobs was doing this a long time ago. Even in the 80s and 90s, he was removing ports left and right and making sure that he can get to the most basic, fundamental products. He didn't want his products to do too many different things. He didn't bring Java to the to the iPhone for a long time, and he got pushback for that. He was not somebody that would just bring things into the Apple ecosystem just because they could. You know, he was really methodical about the things that he brought to the brand, and he created the brand. It took somebody like Steve Jobs to get Apple to the point where it was seen as this luxury, you know, mega brand. Obviously, they weren't as big as they are now with Steve Cook, but if it wasn't for Steve Jobs, Steve Cook wouldn't have had that platform to push it. So I think Apple needs both Steve Cook and Steve Jobs, but at different points. So in conclusion, Steve Jobs was one of the best CEOs to ever live. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And he created some amazing products. He was a visionary. And one other thing I want to talk about Steve Jobs versus Steve Cook is that Steve Jobs was somebody that got his hands dirty. I'm a design guy. That's why I love Apple products, is because they're designed beautifully. They're well designed. And one of the things that Steve Jobs would do is he would go into the design team and he would talk about different things. Well, why is this way? You know, why can't we do it this way? And he would think about the end user experience. And he had a very close relationship with Johnny Ive. And I think that's one of the reasons why Johnny Ive left Apple, is because they didn't make revolutionary products. They didn't think outside the box anymore. You know, Steve Cook is a numbers guy. He's a logistics guy. He wants to make sure that they can grow revenue and make sure that the supply chain is intact. If Steve Jobs was the CEO of Apple right now, Apple would not be as big as they are, but they would definitely create better products, higher quality products, better looking products, products that are going to be different, might think outside the box. I think that would be the case. I don't think they would be as big, but they would create better products. And I don't think Steve Cook cares as much about design. He's not a guy that's in there gets his hands dirty. I think he's more of on the sidelines, caring more about the numbers, caring more about growing the business. I think that's Steve Cook. And even with the design of Apple Park, you know, when Steve Jobs was still alive, he had his hands in the pot. And I remember watching a video on Foster and Partners, and the CEO of Foster and Partners was telling a story about Steve Jobs and how when they started creating, you know, Apple Park, Steve Jobs came to him and he said, I don't want you to think of me as a client. I want you to think of me as an employee. He had his hands in the dirt. He had his hands in the design. And that's something that he had his hands in at Apple when it came down to the iPad, the iPhone, the iMac, you know, the laptops. Steve Jobs was in there with Johnny Ive, you know, brainstorming and doing things. And that's not something that Steve Cook does anymore. I don't think he does that. I think Apple's too big. I think he's a numbers guy. But Steve Jobs, he was that guy. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about Steve Jobs. Let me know your favorite iPhone design under Steve Jobs. You know, my favorite one is the iPhone 4S in white. I think that's the most beautiful iPhone ever made. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.